You're tuned in to the Andrew Lawton Show.
Over the weekend, a very long caucus meeting resulted in the expulsion of 2 MLAs from Jason Kenney's UCP caucus. Those MLAs, Todd Loewen and Drew Barnes, seem to be punished for challenging their leader, if you will. Todd Loewen is the MLA who last week published that letter in which he announced he was stepping down from his role as UCP caucus chair and calling on Jason Kenney to resign. This was really trying to call attention to what he says is a leadership deficit in the way Jason Kenney's been handling the pandemic. We know there's been a lot of criticism for Kenney from within his own caucus on lockdowns and restrictions, and Todd Loewen had said, listen, I cannot serve in this position. So this was something that triggered this marathon caucus meeting on the weekend, again, 7 hours long by all accounts. And at the end of it, Drew Barnes, who we've had on the show a number of times, was also caught up in it. Now, Drew Barnes has been in the past critical of certain government directives, but he's also been in other ways a foot soldier of the UCP, as Todd Loewen has, and more importantly, they're trying to represent their constituents and their base. But that was not good enough. The UCP has ejected them from caucus and said that they were dividing the caucus, dividing the party. I want to dig into this a little bit further. Drew Barnes, Cypress Medicine Hat MLA, joins me on the line now. Newly independent Cypress Medicine Hat MLA. Drew, it's good to talk to you. Thanks for coming on today.
Nice to talk to you again, Andrew. Thank you.
Now, Drew, as I mentioned, you are a newly independent MLA, but I should stress this is not by choice, is it?
Yeah, it was an interesting situation for sure. The Premier, for about a year, had said that he welcomed public debate, he welcomed public discussion. Of course, Andrew, I'm not in cabinet, so my role is to hold the government to account. And of course, Cypress Medicine Hat constituents believe that Alberta should be the free and most prosperous place in North America. And that was my job and my goal to, do what I could to make that happen. And, all of a sudden, Thursday, after my colleague Todd Loewen had published the letter, it was determined that I should be ejected from caucus as well. But, Andrew, that's also an important part. Todd Loewen, a very respectful, hardworking, constituent conservative, heard from his constituents to such a degree that Premier Kenney and the UCP government had not met expectations that he felt so strongly he had to publicly ask for the Premier's resignation. And then that kicked off a process that I now find myself as an independent.
So I have to ask you on that note, Drew, why you? Why at this point? Because I understand, not that I agree with it, but I understand the timing of Todd's expulsion from caucus, given that he had written that letter. It was kind of surprising when at the end of this meeting, the news comes out that you were swept up in this as well. What was the rationale for kicking you out at that moment?
All as I can surmise is that Premier Kenney really doesn't believe in dissent and debate. And again, when I'm not a member of cabinet, when I'm not a minister, it's my obligation. And I'm so honored to represent Cypress Medicine Hat now in my third term. It's my obligation to present ideas to the government, to criticize when they're wrong, to present ideas and to hold them to account. And my summation at this point is that wasn't the case. I think back 7 or 8 months when I supported the government because we had a regional approach to the COVID lockdowns. And when the government abandoned a regional approach, I changed my level of support for what they were doing. And I don't know, in the rearview mirror, I guess it was only allowed if I was mostly on side.
Certainly the lockdowns and restrictions seem to galvanize a lot of people, and we're seeing this across the country, not just in Alberta, as far as a response to government's directions and policies on this. But you had some misgivings about the way that the government was handling some other files, I know. You and I spoke previously about Western alienation, about the upcoming referendum, and it sounds like this lockdown, the resistance to the lockdowns was not an isolated frustration, if I can use the word, that you had.
Yeah, I hear it time and time again from Albertans and Cypress Medicine Hatters that they feel strongly that Premier Kenney has not met expectations. 2 years ago, the election of the Premier and the UCP was to get a fairer deal with Ottawa and our Canadian partners. I mean, we send about 25 billion more a year into the Canadian Confederation than we receive, and we've had some tough times. And it's time to change that. And Albertans tell me all the time that they want to push the envelope to see what can be achieved. There's a lot of disenchantment. They feel that Premier Kenney has abandoned that. Secondly, the fiscal situation, Andrew. Right now, Alberta has the highest per capita deficit of all Canadian provinces. And of course, our desire for freedom, for choice, for fiscal responsibility is very, very high here. And Andrew, maybe the third thing is a poll came out a short time ago showing that Premier Kenney in Alberta, Premier Kenney's popularity has slipped so much, he's polling at the same level as Justin Trudeau. And so when you're polling at the same level with somebody whose values don't match Albertans, that's an indicator of the frustration and the desire for change that Albertans are having.
I know you said that you're not in cabinet, so you thought that your role as an MLA was to speak out against things that you didn't like and hold the government to account. But there is, I think, a question that a lot of people would ask here, Drew, which is why did you, if you had these misgivings about the leadership of your party, why did you not resign? Why did you stick around in the UCP when you were seeing these concerns that you've outlined?
Yeah, and a fair question, and thank you for that. We're 2 years into this term. We're 2 years before the next election. And it was always that trade-off. You try to change it from within. You keep speaking up from within. You keep trying to put things on the caucus agenda that never appear on the caucus agenda. At what point do you say, I'm better to be outside this party than inside to affect the kind of change that my constituents are looking for? Freedom and prosperity is what I hear daily from families and communities in Alberta and Cypress Medicine Hat. Again, the feeling is strong that Premier Kenney and the UCP is off track. And and Andrew, one of the things about now that's kind of ironic is, 6-8 months ago when I'd be talking to my constituents and they'd say, yeah, we're not happy with the way things are going, but stick there, keep trying to change, see what can happen. I would estimate maybe 70% used to say that. In the last month, fewer and fewer. So, and I'm excited about this opportunity. Now I have the chance to be an independent conservative. I think there's tens of thousands of Albertans whose voices aren't being heard. This gives me the opportunity to listen to them, to learn from them, and to act. And, I'm grateful that I have the chance to be the voice of many Albertans who feel their thoughts and ideas weren't making it to the floor of the legislature.
When you look at what happened in your time in the UCP, culminating in this expulsion from caucus, had you been put on notice? Had you been warned, or was this completely out of left field?
Completely out of left field. There was a caucus meeting for Thursday. It was canceled, and that would have been the second one in a row canceled. I woke up the next morning and saw Todd Loewen's letter calling for the Premier's resignation. And I thought, okay, this will lead to something. So a new caucus meeting was called for 12:30. There was a little trouble getting it going. And about 5-1 when it started, the second or third thing was there's going to be a vote on ejecting Todd Andrew Barnes. So I ended up spending 5 or 6 hours on the phone, saying my side of the story, what I was hearing from my constituents, the Premier's plummeting popularity, and how that was a factor, how we needed to pivot as a group. And then we ended up with votes cast, and at about 7:35, as expected, as soon as it was announced that they were going to vote on my ejection, I believed I was done. But as expected, at 7:35, I was done, and it's time to talk to my constituents, talk to my family, and it's time to reorganize so I can do the best job for Albertans that believe in freedom, prosperity, and fiscal conservative values.
Has there been a roadmap of sorts on how you might get back into caucus, if that's something you would at all even be interested in, or is your view that this is kind of a permanent response?
Well, as a conservative, and as I was one of the early people to support putting the two legacy parties, the Wild Rose and the PCs together, a lot of the great work done by our volunteers in terms of policy and governance for the UCP is great stuff. There's a lot of good stuff there. So there's a lot of things I'm aligned with the UCP for sure. But at this point, what I am not aligned with is the leadership. So that would have to change.
How alone, if I can use the term, do you feel you are among your former colleagues right now? Because I've heard whispers and rumors of people that are similarly dissatisfied, but when push comes to shove, I'm not hearing the public displays of support for you and Todd right now.
Yeah, thanks for that question. No, I feel quite strong, and thank them so much. Several of them spoke on my behalf. Several of them have texted me, called me, emailed, offering support and a chance to talk. I feel really strong about it. And it was always the same age-old struggle. Do you speak up just from within, or do you speak up publicly, or do you do both? How does caucus move a premier and cabinet to get them on track to where Albertans are happy with the direction, which again is freedom and prosperity, in Albertans' books and Cypress Medicine Hat. So no, there's a lot of support there for what I was doing and what I was saying, especially when it comes to pushing the envelope with Ottawa for a fair deal, having regionalization for the COVID restrictions, smaller, less expensive government. There was lots of support. And I'm a little concerned that my ejection will lead some of them to speak up less because there's a penalty to pay. But the other side of that, Andrew, is I've had hundreds of people reach out to me just in 2 or 3 days and pat me on the back, congratulate me, offer me encouragement is the main thing. And so I'm really grateful for that. And I will bet you, and I'll guarantee you, that my colleagues will be the same. When they stand with their constituents, they'll get support. And that's important.
That is, I think, a tremendously important point, because, there's that old line that, eventually you're going to run out of people to stand up for you if you don't stand up for others who go through this. And if there are these frustrations, if we are going to see boiling points coming forward on lockdown policy, on Western alienations, it stands to reason that other people will end up in a very similar situation. And you're right, when confronted with that, you've got two choices. You can either go along with the group or you can stand up. And I think a lot of people might not realize how many people there are like them that are out there and that are even within the caucus. And I think this is especially true for a party that's a relatively new party, a party that also is in a first-term majority government, which means you've got a lot of first-term MLAs that might not know their own power.
Yeah, exactly. And they have tremendous power. I mean, 87 of us are paid by the taxpayers of Alberta to speak on the behalf of 4.4 million Albertans. And the legislature is the opportunity, magnified through the media like True North to get those ideas out. And there's a tremendous amount of power. And that power comes from the people. And, just my Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn stuff since I put out my statement, saying that I was going to, be an independent conservative, I was going to be the voice of many Albertans who felt their voices weren't being heard. It's in the thousands that have reached out to me and offered support and ideas. And we're excited about the opportunity going forward. And, I have good relations with many of my former colleagues, and I will always open when the goal is making Alberta the best and free and prosperous. We all have our hearts in that same thing. So I'm optimistic. I'm excited that this will work out better for Albertans.
Just moving forward, is your plan to continue to sit as an independent? Are you looking at joining the Wild Rose Independence Party or some other party? And I guess extending on that, what about the next election?
Well, thank you. Thank you very much. First, I'm going to be talking to my family, my wife, and I have 3 adult sons. Then I'm going to spend as much time as possible talking to my constituency and see their preferences, their ideas, their decisions. I'm grateful that the people in WIPA, people in other parties have reached out to me and talked to me, and I'm certainly willing to hear their ideas and that kind of thing. But going forward, I'm going to be sitting as an independent, talking to my constituents, hearing what's important. And when it comes to the next election, I'm so grateful that I'm in my 10th year, my third term. I'm honored to represent Cypress Medicine Hat. And I feel strongly that I still have the energy, the ideas, and the desire to serve Albertans and to serve Cypress Medicine Hat. So at this point in time, I'm keenly still interested in public service, and future might be a bit up and down and topsy-turvy the next little while. So let's see what happens.
Newly independent UCP MLA for Cypress Medicine Hat, Drew Barnes. Drew, thanks so much for coming on today.
Andrew, thanks for talking to you.
Thanks for listening to The Andrew Lawton Show. Support the program by donating to True North at www.tnc.news.